Hello, School Transportation Nation. Tony Corbin here with School Transportation News. We're happy you made it to the podcast. It's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software. We've got a great episode for you this week. We got the dynamic editorial duo of Taylor Ekpatani and Mr. Ryan Gray. They are both joining us for a deep dive on the top headlines of 2023. But we're also going to dive into current headlines because, there's always action in the world, Taylor. I know you're keeping an eye on the latest in school transportation land as we sail into the Christmas holidays. Hanukkah is rolling, so we're in the thick of it right now, right, Taylor? Happy holidays.
Yeah, it's going by really fast. So I can't believe we're already here wrapping up 2023. It seems like time is moving exponentially.
I know it happens quick. So let's take a dive, Taylor. What were kind of some of the top headlines that you had seen on the stnonline.com website recently that kind of stood out? I know we got wire reports, which are kind of industry headlines from around the industry, but we also have our own stories that we curate. So what were kind of some things that recently jumped out on our website that you saw?
So I think, and I know we're going to talk about it a little later, so I don't want to dive into the top headlines, but our current headlines are kind of reflecting the top headlines just in terms of some violence that's been happening and some things that we've been reporting on in terms of that. So right now,
holiday spirit, Taylor, is that what you're telling me? Violence? That doesn't sound very cheery.
Not. It's really not. But our crime reporter, we always joke in our editorial meetings, Marari, she's always on it. She's our editorial intern and she's always finding these articles and reporting on them. So she's doing a great job. But yeah, the two recent ones are Tennessee man accused of attempting to kidnap girls from school bus stops. So, we've seen that and we've talked about it at the conferences as well, as school bus drivers are on the front lines, so they can be looking for stuff like that. And then, of course, the other one, New York school bus driver indicted for alleged kidnapping and rape. So
yeah, those are concerning headlines. I know we brought forward a bus driver did not stop at an unscheduled stop for a parent, and it was Delaware, right? And the parent pursued the school bus in their own personal vehicle and then struck the bus with something or an object, broke a window, and the window then fell on students in the bus. There is a lot of really egregious behavior happening, and how do we as school transportation professionals address these challenging situations, because they are unique, they happen on the fly, emotions are running high. Clearly we're talking about safety issues in a lot of different aspects. One, school bus stop safety, the other on vehicle safety with students. Clearly there are ramifications to behavioral things. So these people are all facing charges, legal entanglements now for this behavior. And it's tough because how do we as an industry address this? How do we tackle it? We talk about it at the conferences, and this is a training thing, but sometimes crazy happens, Taylor. It's just what happens out there. Now, the issue with the school bus driver, obviously being accused of kidnapping and rape, I mean, that is deeply concerning. Obviously, if it's a school bus driver, one of our own, and we always see some of these headlines kind of cross us. And it's always something to stay vigilant on. Background checks. You can never be 100%, but definitely a bad look for the industry when we see these sorts of headlines. Ryan, what's your kind of reaction to some of these larger kind of crime, violence-based stories we're seeing?
Well, unfortunately, it's reflective of a larger society. It's just, sadly, there's a lot more violence out there today. Recently, hit close to home for me, our local high school, 2 straight days had students on campus with loaded guns, high capacity magazines. So, I mean, when this stuff is happening, 5 minutes from where I live, unfortunately, it's the world we live in, and transportation is certainly not immune. If anything, you mentioned they're on the front lines. They're the first and oftentimes the last school district employee who is in charge of watching children to and from school. So, it's an extension of the classroom. And unfortunately, what we see impacting school buildings is impacting school buses. So, I think that the interest in these articles indicates also what folks are dealing with. I mean, this is resonating with folks because they're seeing these kind of things happen every day. They're certainly, if not seeing some of these same instances or examples of instances, they have this kind of fear. So they're just looking to learn more about what happened, what they can potentially do to prevent these things from happening in their districts.
Ryan, I agree with you, and definitely safety plays a big role in what we do every day as school transportation professionals out there, and we see more and more issues happening. I mean, there was another headline that I read on the website about a Florida student on a bike being hit by their school bus. Right. This is just being aware of the road, being aware of people on the road. And these all are things that play a factor in the overall discussion of driver safety, driver awareness. And again, it all comes back to the driver, which is scary because we're always counting on the drivers to be that kind of mainstay for our industry. Yet they're the least compensated person in the old, in the rung, right? And so how do you take care of these people and make sure that they're giving you their best, but they're under such immense pressure? And I think that's something we always discuss as a bigger picture item. And it's a tough nut to crack, Ryan. I mean, This is a tough one.
Exactly. And talking about the bigger picture, I had a conversation, and I've had numerous conversations with Dick Fisher, one of the elder statesmen in the industry, father of School Bus Safety Week back in the early 70s, getting President Richard Nixon to issue that first proclamation. He is so big on training, especially around the danger zone at school bus stops. And, he points out correctly that so much of the industry's attention goes to illegal passing. And certainly it's a big, big problem. But we gloss over sometimes, and perhaps it's out of self-preservation that, we don't look at the school bus driver's role. And obviously, the vast majority of the time, the school bus drivers are doing the right thing. They're being safe. But, things happen, whether you want to call them accidents or crashes, negligence or not. School bus drivers are human. And you pointed out there's a couple of nefarious things where it's just criminal activity. And there's bad apples in every bunch, unfortunately. But when we're talking about operations at school bus stops or en route, we know that school bus drivers are human and sometimes they err. Dick's point is, and, relative to this case you mentioned of this bicyclist that was killed, we see a number of those happen every year, but they go unreported. We certainly try to pick up on as many as we can. Dick does, and he has a newsletter that goes out daily where he scours the web looking for anything related to school busing and school transportation. But it reminds me of the recent National Loading and Unloading Survey that came out in November at the NASDIP's annual conference. Kansas State Department of Education compiles that every year, and they reported only 3 fatalities, and it was this hallmark where it was one of the fewest in recent memory. But again, we have to look at it and say, okay, well, maybe not within the limited scope of how that survey operates, where it relies on state police and local police crash reports that involve a school bus on scene and a child died. And normally that's looking at a student on the bus, but it's missing. And this is to no fault of Kansas State Department of Education by any stretch. Keith Dreiling and his team do a great job, but they're limited on what they can get and what they can ask, and certainly what's reported to them. But there's dozens of other instances where other students or other pedestrians are killed around the school bus. And it's just something that we can't forget about. We also have to look at that, because when you're talking about training, you can't just train for one thing and not the other, right? You have to train for the entire scope of operations. And we know that obviously the first and foremost, folks will say, well, the school bus drivers are responsible for the kids on their route. Absolutely. That's without a question. But we also, as an industry, owe it to society to be operating as safely as possible around everyone else. And certainly, when you're talking about students, whether they're the students on the bus or they're students that are riding their bikes near the bus, all those lives are vital. And, you get into a lot of other aspects of, was the bicyclist pulling out in front of the bus? Yeah, probably most times, probably yes. But still, these are training opportunities. So not casting blame on anybody, but it's training opportunities. So that's why we try to shine the light on as many of these incidents as we can, so that folks can, look at them, evaluate them, at least, look at their own operations and ask questions and talk to their people, so that they can make sure that they're doing as much as possible so that everyone remains safe, inside and around school buses.
Yeah, Ryan, and I'm going to be looking at loading and unloading for the February issue of School Transportation News. So I've been kind of doing a deeper dive in this and looking at training as well. And when I was talking to Dick Fisher for the article, he mentioned that kids, aren't even supposed to cross the street unless the school bus is there. So looking at these routes or looking at these school bus stops that districts have, if they're on the other side of the street from where that student lives, or if that student has to cross the street to get there, they need to be trained to wait on the other side until the school bus gets there. And I think that's really important. And that really opened my eyes, because it's like, hey, do these kids know that? Because they're probably just running across the street. Oh, I need to get here, not even thinking about what could be happening.
Absolutely. And, and there's been a big movement across the industry to limit those student crossings to begin with. I mean, we see all these horrific videos, these near misses where the illegal passers are charging past the school bus, and a couple kids are walking across the street and barely, narrowly avoid, getting hit. But should we be crossing students to begin with? And, I've had a lot of spirited discussions with readers on both sides of the fence, and have been told, well, to limit those to only picking up kids on the side of the street where they live, that's going to create, further inefficiencies and wreak havoc on time arrival and whatnot. I've talked to other people that are doing it and say, hey, we worked with our routing company. We figured it out. It's not that hard. So again, it comes down to a lot of times people have been used to doing things a certain way, and things evolve, like it or not. And technology does provide a lot more tools now, so that school districts can evaluate where their students live and relative to where the school bus stops are. Certainly looking at hazardous routes, that remains, one of the biggest aspects of routing. So there's a lot of tools there, and just a lot of different trains of thought on how we can get closer to zero, because that's what everyone talks about, the path to zero fatalities. Is it possible? Yes. Is it hard? Absolutely. Some people would say it's impossible, but again, you look at the number of students that die in and around school buses. It remains a testament to how safe this industry is. But the drive always is, how can we be safer? And when we're talking about the fatalities too, we can't forget about the injuries. Those often get swept under the rug. There was this American Academy of Pediatrics report that came out back in 2001. And it was the first and really only study of its kind that really looked at injuries on school buses. And we reported about it at the time. There's no indication that there's any interest in taking that that up to do a new survey, a new report. I've talked to people. It'd be something that I'd love to champion. So certainly, as we're thinking about fatalities, we can't forget about the injuries and really knowing what we're looking at, because anything else is we're just grabbing at figures from a hat. We need to be scientific about our analysis, and so again, that's why we try to shine a light on things that are going on outside the industry, inside the industry, states, so that they might not fall into the traditional definition of a fatality for school buses, but whether it be a fatality related to school buses or certainly an injury, we as an industry, we need to take note.
Yeah, these are all big topics, Ryan, and I'm sure we'll be talking more about them at STN Expo this summer. Well, I guess our first one is Indianapolis, and that's going to be May 31st through June 4th. So we're excited to take that on. So if you guys are out there in that part of the country, I'd love to have you join us. If that date doesn't work, we also have STN Expo in Reno. That is July 12th through the 17th, I believe. Yeah, that's right. So you guys go to stnexpo.com. We'll be opening up registration in mid-January timeframe. If you're looking for booth space, we are accepting booth reservations. So feel free to give me a call, go on the website, grab a booth. But exciting stuff, Ryan. We'll dive deeper into the top headlines right after a message from our sponsor. Do you remember a time when you could just cherry pick the best solution to run your school transportation operation? The best routing software may be one company. The best parent app could be another company. Those days are over. TransFinder said the old way of doing business doesn't work for today's busy and burdened school transportation departments. They need one partner, one solution. TransFinder has embraced this approach for years now, building award-winning solutions like Route Finder Plus, the driver app Wayfinder, parent app Stop Finder, and inventory management solution Service Finder. They also have field trip management solutions Trip Finder and Viewfinder, which provide critical routing information to other stakeholders in the district. Add to this TransFinder's award-winning hardware and industry's best support and service. You have the ingredients that make up one partner, one solution. It's not just a slogan. It's TransFinder's way of doing business. Learn more by emailing getplus@transfinder.com or calling 800-373-3609. That's 800-373-3609. Remember, one partner, one solution. All right, we're back. Top headlines of 2023. Taylor, kick us off. What should we start at number 10 or number 1? I'm not really sure.
I think we should start at 10.
10? All right. Let's go. Like, what's number 10? What are we looking at? What are some top stories?
So number 10 is the story that I feel like a lot of people in the nation and outside of the nation have heard about. And it's that video of the school bus driver who kind of went off on her students. And I know we had her at STN Expo as well. I was in a different session, so unfortunately I didn't get to sit in on that one. But so number 10.
Viral tirade video shines light on plight of school bus drivers. So that was Jackie Miller. She was a Cleveland area school bus driver. So those of you who are at STN Expo Reno saw Jackie. She was sat on a panel that was moderated by our good friend Greg Jackson, formerly of Jeffco Public Schools in Colorado, now with School Bus Logistics, a consultant with them. But talking about a lot of this behavior, Tony, that we were mentioning earlier, school bus drivers like Jackie, she just had it. She blew her gasket. She had a couple of kids that were just making her life miserable for not only last school year. So again, this happened in March of 2023. So it was the 22-23 school year. It was all that school year that about 2 or 3 particular kids were just making her life hell. And she told me that it had gone back to the year prior. So these were middle school kids. Somebody at TSD, one of the behavioralists, mentioned that there's middle school disease that a lot of these kids have. And but she said all the other kids were great, but it was just these three that were just making her life horrible. She's asthmatic. They were, one of the girls was copiously would spray perfume to try to exacerbate Jackie's condition. So, the end result, she finally had it. She blew up, started cursing the students out. One of the students at the back of the bus took out the cell phone, started filming it, took it home, showed mom. She posted it on TikTok. And the rest is history. It went viral. But, back to the point about why so many of these violence and behavior stories are so popular with our readers. The response to Jackie was just overwhelming, how so many people rallied to her defense. A gentleman who I spoke with actually saw it on the news and started a GoFundMe account. I think I haven't looked at it lately, but I think that it garnered Jackie close to $200,000. She resigned immediately following it. She was she knew right away that she overstepped the line and figured, hey, I just got to get out of this. She's in her 70s. She's a grandmother, a cancer survivor. So she just said, I've had it. But she came out to Reno and talked about what, so many of our readers and our attendees know, that school bus drivers today have it really difficult. And a lot of them still are not paid very well. So, we look at this driver shortage, and it's, not a far leap to see why this continues and why it's been worsening, especially since COVID-19. So that was a great article. You guys can go over to stnonline.com and find that.
Yeah, I do not envy being a school bus driver. I mean, they navigate so much stuff. And if you just listen to the videos, I mean, you can hear the kids so loud in the background. I could not imagine.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, I think, when we talked about it, Ryan, as you said, it becomes this thing where people have they feel for her, oh, I remember kids those days. But the other side of it was she should have never done that. Right. So there's this debate of, people that are yeah, they deserve it. Other people are you should never do that. Right. So you've got this kind of yin and yang going on in terms of the overall discussion is who's right.
Oh, yeah.
Who's right. Everybody has their own opinion on it.
Well, it's easy, in retrospect. And Jackie is the first to she's the first to say, hey, what I did was wrong. And that's why she resigned. The superintendent called her that night after he saw the everything go viral, and he wanted to talk. He didn't call her to fire her. He called her to let her know that they were going to start investigating. And she said, look, I need to resign. I obviously overstepped the line. But I just don't want to be a part of this. I think, I need to remove myself too from this situation. So she's again the first to say I shouldn't have done it. But again, school bus drivers are human. Who of us have not, blown our gasket at something, some point in our lives. So, again, it just illustrates again what so many school bus drivers are dealing with. So again, as an industry, let's shine a light on this. Let's talk about it. How can we try to improve this?
All right, Taylor, take us to number 9.
So we mentioned it, I think you brought it up in the beginning of the podcast, Tony, but the Delaware parent facing charges after hitting a school bus. And this is actually interesting because it posted, as we're recording this, we posted it 3 days ago. So it's in 3 days jumped to number 9 on our top 10 of all 2023 articles, which is pretty amazing that this article, I think is over 8,000, reads. But yeah, so this was the parent who punched or used a hard object into the bus window, and it shattered glass on other students. And it seems like the parent was just mad that their child wasn't able to board the bus. They missed their stop. So the parent followed the bus. And then at the next stop, the bus driver wouldn't let the student on because, that's not their stop. And so the parent got mad and punched the window. So another example of, blowing your gasket, just, bad place, bad time. I don't know what was going on with that parent's day, but I'm assuming they didn't mean to, injure the other students when they punched the window or used the hard object.
I would hope not. But, it harkens back to that training we did in STN Expo Reno back in 2015, I believe, where we worked with the Washoe County Sheriff's Office and their SWAT team. and they illustrated for our attendees everything from they called it like the mundane security or safety situation, where it was exactly this: an angry parent approaching the bus stop, whether it's they're going to confront a bully, or the bus is late, or they're mad because the kid said their bus driver said something or did something. Whatever it is, the sheriff's office pointed to the fact that, hey, this is most likely what school bus drivers are going to see. They're going to see some angry parent demanding to get on the bus. They're not going to, they shouldn't be let on. It could escalate the situation. And hopefully it doesn't turn violent, but unfortunately in this case it did. So again, what kind of training do you have in place in your district or your bus company for your drivers of what to do in this type of situation?
All right, Taylor, next on the list, number 8.
Number 8. So this is Alabama teacher and school bus driver struck and killed by school bus. So goes back to training. Again, this history teacher, he taught 10th grade and drove a school bus route for Jefferson County schools. He died after an unoccupied school bus hit and rolled him over. So I think he was doing his pre-trip. Sounds like it. Yeah, he was doing his standard checks prior to the start of his route. And I don't know if he just didn't set his parking brake or something, but then the school bus went backwards and rolled him over.
That's what it sounds like, Taylor. Ryan's nodding in agreement. Sure sounds like a fail there. And, this is where automatic braking makes a big difference versus manual braking. I can only assume the bus was older. Maybe they didn't have, there's different technologies out there that would prevent this.
This is a training issue, though. I over the years, I've heard so many instances of this. Now, unfortunately, there have been several times that just come to mind when they've been fatal, unfortunately. But this is standard stuff, right? And again, we're all human. We forget things. We get rushed. But it's just those little things that we have to pay such fine attention to that can literally be the difference between life and death.
All right, Taylor, take us down the list. Let's keep going. Number 7.
I'm going to punt 7 to Ryan. He wrote the article,
defer.
and I'm doing a punt. So I think he would be better.
He better have his list open so he could take a look at 7. All right.
I'm signaling for a fair catch right now. So this article comes from September. So again, not too long ago. And it looks all the way back. Those of you who are in the industry in March of 2005 may remember Joyce Gregory. She was the Tennessee school bus driver who was shot and killed behind the wheel, picking up students. Jason Clinard, he was the boy. He was 14 at the time, just shy of his 15th birthday. He had been suspended from the bus for chewing snuff. And he was just returning to the bus. He previously had run-ins with Joyce, who was his school bus driver, for fighting on the bus. He had served some in-school suspensions for that. By all accounts, he hated her. She was a disciplinarian, and he obviously needed a lot of discipline in his life. When he returned to the school bus, he brought with him a 45 caliber semi-automatic pistol and shot her, and right there in front of a busload of children, ran off into the woods. We reported on this widely at the time. This was really, to our knowledge, the first school bus driver murdered in the line of duty. And of course, since then, we've had a couple of others. Chuck Poland in Alabama. We also had a stabbing up in Pasco, Washington a couple of years ago. So, long story short, Jason, he ended up being tried as an adult. He served more than 18 years of a life sentence. And basically on a technicality, he was released just a couple months ago because of, and quite frankly, in reading the case, he had some poor representation. His defense attorney at the time did not have any murder trial experience, no experience working with juveniles. And the state, of course, was trying to try him as an adult. And he basically, the defense attorney advised Jason to go ahead and allow that, when other defense attorneys who have experience with murder trials and with juveniles said absolutely not. There was some mental health issues. There were psychiatrist evaluations that indicated that with counseling and time spent in juvie that he could be rehabilitated. But the defense attorney went ahead and advised him to go to adult court. So basically, after several appeals over the last decade or more, a court did grant his case to be returned to juvenile court, where under those conditions, when you cease being a juvenile when you're 18, so basically the case was then dismissed. So he was released with time served. Again, one of the first real instances of true violence on the school bus that I saw, at least. And I was just starting out in this industry at the time. But certainly ever since then, we've seen security rise to the forefront of concerns for student transporters. And of course, like I mentioned, and there's far more examples out there of just some really, horrible things, tragic things that have happened. So again, training.
Yeah, Ryan, and I just want to read a comment on our Facebook page after we posted this article from Mitchell Kern. He said, "That was his bus 18 years ago. Miss Joyce was one of my favorite people. Jason, one of my best childhood friends. There was never justice for anyone, just pain and trauma that we have felt every day for 18 years. So very sad. And obviously this incident, still holds a lot of people's hearts.
Sticking in Tennessee with our next most viewed story on STN Online, Tennessee mom attacks bus driver after son can't get off the bus. And Taylor, it seems like we just mentioned this same scenario, a few minutes ago.
Yeah, it seems like it's a common theme. Parents are getting upset that their, child can't switch stops. And I'm actually kind of curious about this. I don't know if you guys can speak on it, but I'm going to put you on the spot here. So, kids going home with friends or something, they're not allowed to get off on a different spot, or is that maybe they need to communicate with the school bus driver first?
Well, generally speaking, and again, every school district's different, so I can't speak to all, 16,000 out there. But to my knowledge, generally speaking, students, they need to only be picked up and released at a certain spot. Now, there are obviously considerations to be made. Namely, looking at when a student splits their time with divorced parents. The parents have joint custody, but these are things that need to be set up and communicated with the district the beginning of the school year, or whenever the student starts riding the bus. Certainly, it could a student could be a transfer in midway through, or maybe it's a student with an IEP that requires transportation, and they start needing transportation after the school year has already begun. But these are things that need to be communicated. It can't just be willy-nilly they decide to get off where their friends are. Now, again, I say this with a broad brushstroke, right? This is how I understand it, general practice. Different school districts, individual school districts might have different policies, but especially in terms of a best practice, what I hear time and time again from experts in the industry is that students need to get off at their stop and not get off, at other places where maybe their friends are. Because again, this comes back to their safety and accountability for where the students are.
Taylor, also, there's always the parent perception that the yellow bus is a taxi service, and the parents treat it as such, as if, drop my kid off here or there. And, transportation has to rein that expectation in that, hey, look, we appreciate that you want us to be your taxi service, but that is not our function. We are here as a function of getting your child to school and getting them home safely. The other ancillary child care or situational things, that is not school transportation's responsibility. So I hear transportation professionals bringing that up, that parents have a, let's call it skewed view of how the yellow school bus is utilized sometimes. So I'm sure in School Transportation Nation, listeners can relate. They're probably all nodding their heads. Yep, that's right. We deal with that. So, all right, let's head on to the next headline.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so number 5. Pennsylvania school district turns to remote learning during bus driver shortage. And I think we've kind of seen a lot of this, after the pandemic. Going to remote learning was kind of more accessible for schools. So it's been a way to maybe combat the driver shortage, or maybe, get things in order for a little bit. I know we saw this in a couple different school districts, kind of turning to remote learning for a couple days while they kind of sort out whether it was routing issues or something kind of like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and one of the things we've also seen with remote learning is it's really eliminated the need for snow days anymore, because it used to be the old time. If you lived in a very snowy climate, blizzard or whatnot, kids would celebrate. Oh, great! It's a snow day, no school. Well, not so much anymore. You just go to the computer, and schools can pretty quickly, at the turn of a dime, start having a virtual day. And you're right. I think that no school district prefers to have virtual, and especially caused by a bus driver shortage. I mean, it's one thing in inclement weather where it's unsafe to be on the roads, but when it's not, and not being able to hold in-person class because you don't have enough school bus drivers, that's not a good place to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Let's breeze through, Taylor. Number 4.
All right, moving along. So number 4, Florida school bus driver arrested after girl is left on bus, drove around for hours.
Training. Child left on bus. This is not a small thing. It happens a lot more than we realize, because as Ryan mentioned, sometimes this stuff just goes unreported. I know there's a few companies out there like Child Checkmate. I know there's IE Sensing. There's different technologies to try to address this. I know Zonar uses their tags to people go back, but there's a lot of psychology that goes into this too. And one of the number one things I had been told was the reasons drivers miss sleeping students, they need to get off the bus to go to the restroom. Like, they're so focused on that they forget everything else, even if there's a child sleeping. Like, they just don't see the child. Mm-hmm. And this happens actually more veteran drivers than it does rookie drivers, because they have this kind of muscle memory, and the child could be plain as day, but they just don't see him. And it's something that occurs. I know we talked about it at the conferences. We've had different experts. I know we had Dr. David Diamond at STN Expo Indianapolis talk about what this looks like. Why do parents leave a child in a car seat in the back of a car? They just drive to their normal routine and forget the child is there. And then there's an issue where the child could die of heat exhaustion. Generally, it's heat. It's not cold, but definitely these are things that happen, and you have to shake your head, and it just comes back to the training.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And the bathroom breaks, that's one of the biggest things you hear from school bus drivers. I mean, that's a huge deal for them. And you mentioned, Tony, a lot of veteran drivers. Well, a lot of these veteran drivers tend to be older. Sometimes they're retired. We know that with age, it's a little bit harder to hold it, if you will. And that's a very big deal. And these can become emergencies, literally, for people when you have to go that bad. And that's just one of the potential reasons, of course. But again, back to training. All right, number 3, we're getting up there, Taylor. North Carolina student arrested for shooting gun on bus.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't understand like how kids are getting a hold of these weapons. It's obviously someplace at home or something like that. But kid brought a gun onto the school bus and accidentally shoots another student, injures them. It's really terrible to hear, because the student isn't trying to do that. It's just, oh look, I have this gun. Look at it. So it's a really sad situation.
Yeah, well, hopefully not. Yeah, but
Right.
But certainly it appears with this one, there was a 14-year-old who was either playing with the gun or showing it to the friend, and it accidentally discharged. But again, when we're talking about weapons, We had Brett Brooks out at STN Oaksville Reno this past summer talking about weapon detection and skills that school bus drivers can learn. In the past, we've had Mike Dorn and his son Chris Dorn from Safe Havens International provide actual examples and Brett did a little bit of this in July as well, but examples of how many weapons students can be hiding on their person. So again, the word of the day, Tony, training.
I'm going to throw another question to you guys. Mm-hmm. I'm putting you guys on the spot again. Do you think there's ever going to be a day or there's a need, for metal detectors, either at school buses, maybe you walk through and it kind of goes off, or there's some infrared screening, or at school sites? Because I know when I went to the school district of Philadelphia, when I went into the admin building, I went through a metal detector and put my bag into the, airport-like scanner, and it was just kind of normal. So I don't know if we're getting to this point where we're going to see that in schools.
Yeah, well, we already are. I mean, you look at for a long time, you look at school district like Detroit Public Schools, they've had metal detectors for a decade or more. And, I was mentioning the gun incidents at my local high school last week. They've put in a metal detector. Now, when you're talking about that, it's a controversial issue. A lot of the safety experts, like the Mike Dorns that I've talked to, they are opposed to those. And a lot of folks think a knee-jerk reaction is no metal detectors. And I don't know exactly what the right answer is, but I know that Mike has told me, and I've seen this from other school security experts as well, that when you're talking about metal detectors and you're talking about limiting the access points, that can create a hazard in itself, especially in an event of an emergency. There's also the perception of it, and I know a lot of people think that perception be damned.
What about SROs, Ryan? I know we've talked about school resource officers for sure, and we've had a few at the conferences over the years. I mean, that plays a factor too. I remember seeing more engagement from SROs on campus regarding this. Is that something you see more prevalent too in schools?
SROs? Well, that's the drive. I mean, the National Association of School Resource Officers has been lobbying Congress for years to get an SRO in every school building across America. Now, again, in reality, there's just not enough man and woman power to make that happen. Also, it's a budgetary issue, but certainly, having SROs and school resource officers too. So these are police officers, but they're especially trained to work with students in a school environment. So it's not just having your cops, off the street, off the beat, walking the halls at the high school. But it's these professionals that are trained to work with students and to work on de-escalation first in case of any incident. But certainly that would be the desire, I think, of all security experts, is to have more SROs.
All right, we can keep on going. So number 2, I just appreciate you guys answering my questions on the fly. So number 2, we talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the podcast, but the National School Bus Loading Zone Survey reported 3 fatalities. So I don't know if we wanted to add any more there, but you were up in NASDIP's up. That's up from us, right?
Yeah, up and over in the DC area, Arlington, Virginia to be exact. But yeah, that was released on November 9th when I was out there at the conference. I mentioned Keith Dreiling and the Kansas State Department of Education that conducts that annual survey. As probably most of you are aware, it's an annual survey of the 50 states and the District of Columbia. Now, this year, DC, New Jersey, and Rhode Island, quote, refused to participate, unquote. That was the language that the survey used. And I asked them about that, and they said, yes, it was okay to run that. But again, it reveals 3 fewer student fatalities in the previous school year and the fewest reported fatalities since 2019. When there were 2 recorded deaths. And now, again, as I mentioned earlier, the parameters for this survey are the states self-report based on police reports from fatalities where a school bus was on scene. the school bus has to be on scene or had immediately left or was immediately in the vicinity for it to be counted. And as I was mentioning before, though, so many other incidents fall outside of that scope. And, certainly we can feel good that with the school bus on scene, apparently there was only 3 now. I'm talking to Dick, I think we uncovered at least 2 others that were not reported for whatever reason, and try to do a deeper dive on that and try to extrapolate why. But 3 fatalities, 5 fatalities, still overall very small. But we just, with that said, we cannot forget the other students and the other people that are killed around the bus. Sometimes it's the fault of those people. Sometimes it's the fault of the school bus. But when we're talking about student transportation safety, we need to look at the entire picture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so drum roll, please. Number 1, Taylor.
I'm trying to drum roll, but I think it's going to mess up with the noise. Okay, there we go. So Proterra files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection is number 1.
Yep. So 17,000 views since that news came out in August. And Taylor, you reported on that. And we had known that Proterra was doing some belt tightening, to say the least. And filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, reorganization, and it went to the even farther than that, went up to auction. So we know from that auction, Volvo was the winning bidder for the battery business from Proterra. And Phoenix Motor Cars, they won the electric drive. So it led to a larger conversation, I think, Tony, where we've been discussing so many players in the EV space now. We've seen it over the last couple of years, especially in Reno at STN Expo, with the number of exhibitors, just the number of companies that are attending, the growth of the ACT Expo, the Advanced Clean Technology Expo that we're a media partner of, that's every spring. The concern has been what happens if one of these newer companies doesn't exist tomorrow, and you've bought their bus, or you've bought their chargers, or you bought their widget that's necessary for an electric vehicle. What happens if they go away? What about support? And what we've seen, Proterra has been one of the more established companies on this front. Of course, they've been around for over a decade, 15 years or more.
Didn't the White House did like a press conference with their CEO too, right? Like that was really big headlines.
Exactly. With the whole bipartisan infrastructure plan, that law that went into effect. Yeah. President Biden was there at the Proterra plant in South Carolina. And, they really made a big splash, transit buses. So there's a lot of electric transit buses that are Proterras out there. But certainly they became heavily involved in school bus. They provided the original electric drive and the batteries for the Thomas built buses, Julie. Now we know that, going forward, Thomas is going to be using the Meritor Blue Horizon, which is now owned by Cummins. But the Proterra battery was still going to be powering that bus. So, we see a player in the industry that's been around a while, relatively speaking. And, if this could happen to them, what could happen to one of these companies that's just brand new?
Yeah, they're deeply concerning, right? And I think we're going to see a shakeout for sure of manufacturers, people that tried their hand, have been chasing the Biden bucks as part of the Clean School Bus program. But as they'll probably find out, it's a long game. You got to be well capitalized. You're not going to get a quick fix in the school bus industry. It's about partners and attrition. And, I would suggest buyer beware. Make sure you pick good partners that have long-standing roots in this industry, or vet them thoroughly, because this is not a low bid situation, because you might not be able to service that equipment. And if it breaks down and there's no support, you're going to have a big capital investment in equipment and no partner to support it. And that is a scary proposition. And school transportation has really never been faced with that at this level. But imagine your fueling station just stops working. What do you do? How do you can't just like flip a switch and fix it. It's going to take a lot of time, and it could have a big halo effect. So definitely, these are part of the bigger conversations about going to electric and making sure you have good partners to support you. Your OEMs are definitely the backbone of that. So lean into them, lean into the services they have to offer, and make sure they've got your back, right? And your dealer, they got your back. So these are very important considerations when everybody is transitioning to alternative energy. And we've seen from even the propane industry, right? The propane industry is very supportive. They're trying to provide gap stops for fueling, if that's propane, EV, off-grid charging, because we know public utilities, lo and behold, they are kind of the bottleneck to get infrastructure built out. So how do we leverage the different partners to get this technology into our school districts and into the private fleet contractors? And it takes time. People have to be patient. And sometimes companies that are out there, they're living and dying based on investor money, and they're running on these really short runways, and they look really big and really polished. Fake it until you make it, man. And they definitely, you don't see them 1 year later. I have a feeling STN Expo this year, we're going to see significantly less charging companies present. A lot have, there's been a big shakeout from what I can see in the marketplace. I'm calling people and they're like, no, we're not in the market any longer. I was like, wow, you weren't in the market very long. So, they're testing the waters and moving on.
Yep. Well, team, we made it through the list. It was obviously a very eventful 2023. Hopefully, we can not see as many violence related stories in 2024. But, certainly everybody keep fighting the good fight out there. And we appreciate all you do for the safety of the children.
Thanks, Nation. Ryan Taylor, great conversation on our top headlines of 2023. I want to thank TransFinder, the podcast episode sponsor. They've been with us since the beginning. We thank TransFinder and their team for all rolling with us on the School Transportation Nation podcast. Guys, remember to go to stnonline.com for all the latest news, information, updates. We got our 2024 buyer's guide and January issues around the corner. It's coming soon. We want to wish you happy holidays, happy New Year, all that good stuff. We got one more episode before the year is up, so keep an eye on us for next week. Nation, we're always there with you, bringing the latest and greatest. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to pods, make sure you add us there so we pop up every week for you to download and listen to all the great conversations we've got for you. Nation, we love you. We'll see you next week.